Here's the recipe for the royal icing you're going to need for this. 1/2 cup of water and 1/4 cup of meringue powder. Meringue powder is essentially dried egg whites. And you mix those two together with an electric mixture. You're going to beat it for about 4 minutes until it gets nice and frothy. The making of this frosting takes a little while, but it has the quality of drying very hard and very quickly, and it's perfect for assembling gingerbread houses with, and for even decorating cookies. Then you're going to gradually add 4 2/3 cups of icing sugar, a little bit at a time, about a cup at a time, blending after each addition. And then you're going to beat the entire mixture with the electric mixer for at least 4 or 5 minutes until it gets very thick and you get very stiff peaks. Okay, now we're ready to assemble the gingerbread house. First, you're going to need something to assemble it on. I'm using a cake board. It's a round one. You can use whatever shape you'd like. You need something fairly sturdy because the cake finished log cabin is quite heavy and it's quite big. You could even use a large cookie sheet for this if you want to. So I'm just putting together 4 pieces. You can see how the notches fit nicely together, just like a real log cabin. And I'm just positioning it properly on the cake board because you need enough space in the front of it for the porch. And once you have figured that out, you're going to put a little bit of royal icing on the bottom of 2 of the long logs. The long portion of the logs is the front of the cabin, and the short pieces are the sides. I put the royal icing in a piping bag with a medium-sized star tip, I guess. You could use a Ziploc bag with a hole cut out in the corner. That would be fine. Then put a little bit of frosting in the notches, and then simply start to assemble it by putting 2 long pieces, 2 short pieces. Now, sometimes the pieces break like this one did right there. That one right there broke. So I'm taking it apart. I made some extra couple of logs so that I would be able to have some extra pieces. If they do break, though, it's not really the end of the world. The icing will hold things together quite nicely. Just make sure that the nice part of the log, not the flat side that was touching the cookie sheet, is facing outwards. And then put more frosting on each layer and then continue to build your log cabin upwards until you get 7 layers of logs. I'm using cans of vegetables here just to hold the sides in place while I'm building them up. And that way they're not going to fall and they stay nice and straight. Now, I had to move the whole thing because I didn't leave enough room for the porch piece. So be careful when you start to make sure it's in the right position because that could have been disastrous. It could have completely fallen apart when I moved it. Luckily, it stayed together nicely. Now for the gable ends, you're going to take the triangle that you made and just glue the log sections together using some royal icing. The royal icing has the benefit of drying very quickly, and it dries to a very, very rock hard kind of a texture when it's done. So it's very good at gluing gingerbread houses together. And then take the 2 gable ends and stick them on the short ends of the cabin, just like that. I'm using vegetable cans again to hold them in place until they are dry. You can also use bottles of soda or pop, whatever you'd like. And then I'm gluing the porch down in front of the cabin and filling the gap between the cabin and the porch with more royal icing. Now let that dry thoroughly, at least 2-3 hours you want to let that dry. In the meantime, these are the porch support pieces that you can put together. There are 4 of them, and you can see how I've notched only 2 of them. The other 2 are plain. Then you're going to trim the 2 notched beams to 4.5 inches long and the 2 unnotched logs to 5.5 inches. And these are going to be your porch beam and supports. And you'll see here, put a little bit of frosting on either end and in the notch. The notch goes over top of the wall and then the support goes underneath. It's hard to describe, but it's easy to show as I'm showing here. And you can just add additional frosting just to make sure everything stays in place. And I'm using a soup can just to hold it in place to allow it to dry. So put the notched end there, and then, oh, I got a little extra hand. Max is helping me out here. A little bit of frosting top and bottom, and there's your porch support. The roof is going to sit right on top of that. Now, in the meantime, while you're waiting for all that to dry, you can decorate your door. I'm putting a Christmas wreath using just some commercial green icing and a little doorknob. You could use a candy for that as well. And I'm adding some sprinkles onto the wreath to make it look like little berries. And then I'm going to pipe on a little red ribbon with some commercial red icing. So set that door aside. Your chimney pieces, you're going to cover them with royal icing in a thin layer. And then using broken cookie pieces. In this case, I had some extra log pieces that I sliced to make little stone shapes. The recipe says that you can, if you have any leftover scrap gingerbread dough, you can roll it out thin, bake it, and then break it up into pieces and just stick them on. It's going to look like stones on a chimney is what it's supposed to look like. So just completely cover it, leaving a little bit of the royal icing between them to look like mortar. And then you're going to let it dry for several hours or overnight. And you're going to do the same thing with the chimney side pieces as well. A coating of royal icing and some cookie pieces to make it look like stonework. Now I noticed that my porch support had cracked just by the simple pressure of just installing them there. So I added a second beam support. So there's two up and down support beams, one of them right against the front of the cabin and the other one on the actual porch itself. I did another one on the left as well, as you can see. Now for the actual porch railing, that's just more pieces of extra pieces of beams that you have, and then just stick them together with royal icing and just play around with it until you get the right size and the right height. Now for the roof, we're going to put royal icing along the gable edge. And setting the roof down, you can notice I put some juice boxes there just to support the roof until it dries. The front, same thing, some royal icing on the front gable. And then set the roof down. Those porch supports will hold it in place. You don't need to put anything there. And then I went under the peak of the roof along the gable to add extra support with more frosting and more royal icing on the peak of the roof to hide the gap made by the meeting of the two roof pieces. And if your porch supports are dry, if you've let them sit for several hours, then you can attempt to put the porch roof on. And that's what I'm doing now because it had dried, because this is quite late in the evening when I'm doing this. And then a little bit of frosting between the roof and the porch roof to keep them together. Now, let this entire thing dry for several hours or overnight. This is important. Now, the next day, you can put the chimney on. You just put a little bit of royal icing on the top of the chimney and then attach the sides of the chimney. A little bit on the bottom. And then you're at the top of the chimney, you're going to attach those three small pieces that you made. They're called chimney top. You might have to trim them a little bit if they're too long. And you just simply put a little bit of royal icing along all three sides, and just attach it. And cover it with royal icing, and then you're going to put more chimney stones on there. This was probably the most difficult part of the entire house because there are a couple of gaps there you have to fill. I put extra cookie pieces in and some extra royal icing just to fill up the gaps. You might have to fiddle around with that part. The windows, I simply outlined with royal icing, and I'm just decorating with some small candies to make it look like Christmas lights. And put a little bit of royal icing on the back of it and just glue it on to the front of the cabin. Just like that. And I'm adding a little bit of frosting over top of the door to make it look like snow. And some along the edge of the roof. And I'm adding some miniature M&Ms along the edge of the roof to make it look like a house that's been decorated for Christmas. This is Nerd's rope. It's like licorice with little candy stuck to it. And I thought it looked a lot like garland, so I'm using that along the porch edge. And it's flexible as well, so you can make it curve a little bit. And I'm using some cans just to hold it in place until it dries. Now, I wasn't sure what to do with the roof to leave it plain, but what I decided to do was to add some shingle shapes with the royal icing. And then finally, I'm cementing the entire house in place by adding a bead of royal icing along the edge of the porch and all the way around the house to make sure it's firmly attached to that cake board, because you do not want it to move. And then I'm adding a little bit more garland. I thought there was something missing there. And to make the edge of the railing look a little bit smoother, I'm just adding some more royal icing with a writing tip. I added a little squiggle on the porch, and it's done. There's the completed gingerbread log cabin. You can add a little or as much decorations as you want on this. I wanted to look like a house that had been decorated for Christmas. This particular gingerbread house is going to be raffled off at my son's school to raise money for the school, because they're having a bake sale and a tea bazaar. So there's the gingerbread log cabin. Give it a try.